Hello, everyone. Welcome to an exciting new journey. The challenges that immigrants go through, no one understands them fully. I realized a little while ago that my son would never understand what we truly went through. So, I want to do something to chronicle the different paths we take. We're going to be talking to different people from different cultures, and the only thing they have in common is that they've left their homelands to work in the NHS. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the IMG UK podcast. I've got Dr. Hagar Aly with me, and I'll try and introduce her before I let her take the stage and introduce herself. Um, I first met Hagar during my one of the best rotations of my career so far on intensive care. It was a fantastic rotation, and it was made all the more amazing by the people who I had with me. It was just this amazing, diverse cast of individuals who were so giving and so willing to teach others, especially me, given that I had practically no experience in what people do in intensive care, and I was very grateful for that experience, and I remember that time fondly actually. She's an ST3 anaesthetic registrar, so she's an expert at putting people to sleep. Hopefully, that's not what's going to happen in this episode because it'll be very, very exciting. And she's also a budding intensivist. But I'll let her take the stage and I'll let her introduce herself. So, Assalamu alaikum, Hagar. How are you doing?
Walaikum salam. I'm fine, thank you. As you said, very cleverly that I'm an anaesthetic, so I've always been an anaesthetist. I currently work in Surrey. My rotation is between London and Surrey. I am Egyptian. I'm born and raised in Egypt, went to medical school in Egypt, qualified in Egypt, had a training job in Egypt, which I took straight away. The system there is a bit different. So you do 1 year of foundation, and then if you have a training opportunity, depends on your ranking or how much did you technically score in med school, then you get the possibility of getting a training job, which I luckily had. I always knew I wanted to do anesthetics. I actually wanted to do anesthetics since my third year in med school, which is a bit weird. Everybody thinks that you resort to anesthetics when you've kind of exhausted your surgical options, but that wasn't the case for me. I think I knew my way early on. So I went straight into anesthetics, but
You were like one of those kids who grows up and at 6 years old they know they're going to be an anesthetist.
no, I never. Funnily enough, I never actually wanted to be a doctor. I did medicine as well. It was a spat between me and my parents. I went to a religious school actually, so I did GCSEs back in Egypt. And as being an Arab kid, you're forced to like completely ace all your grades, and you have to take a million subjects just to kind of be the super kid that everybody expects you to be. So I actually did A-level biology, A-level chemistry, A-level physics, and A-level business. And I never really knew what I wanted to do. I did lure my father into paying for my private schooling by promising him I'll be an engineer, because he is. And he did buy it, and he did actually pay for the private school. But my mother wanted anyone of the kids to be a doctor, and I was the eldest, so I went to med school, which my father was never really happy about. He still remembers this to this day. But once I got into medical school, it was easy to make the decision, as in I didn't struggle as much with my career or who am I going to be, or as a subspecialty, as much as I did with actually choosing my job or my school or my education. But yeah, anyway, I've always I always knew that I wasn't going to stay in Egypt for too long, because the political culture was a bit difficult for me. It was made a lot worse by the events around 2011 to 2013. But so I studied a lot. My initial plan was to go to Germany with my ex-husband at the time, so I did study a bit of German. And then plans changed because his parents at hospital was cool and they wanted us to do our training jobs. And we both had jobs, so they thought that this was far too precious to waste. So we did take them. And by the end of his training, he was a year older than me. He was fed up with Egypt. I was fed up with Egypt long before that, but I didn't have really. So he re-pursued the Germany option, and I was so tired of having to do this over again. And because of my British education, I had a reasonable working level English. So when he was trying to work out his way in Germany, I thought, well, I'll just go to England for a bit, like have a decent paying job. I was in the middle between taking up my intermediate training and finishing up my core training. And there was a bit of a gap, about 4 months. So I was working sort of back to back too, because essentially parents can't support you for that long time. So I needed to make some money to actually afford living. So I was working 24-hour shifts back to back in different hospitals between my private and my actual work and the things that I was trying to do to learn new things. I was so tired, so I thought I'll just try, the UK for just a couple of months, maybe a year tops, until like he finds his way in Germany, and then I'll join him there. And obviously the marriage fell apart, and I just ended up staying here. And I kind of lost my job in Egypt. There's no way back, as in I gave up my job for good, or my training post for good, which is a little bit deliberate. I didn't want to go back really. And here I am. Since I decided to stay, there's in my head, and I think this is just something I inherited from being a trainee back in Egypt. I've never really not done a job where I was not a trainee, as in when I started, because I went straight into training in Egypt. So going back into some sort of training was the only way. So I basically had to work my way around the system until I got into a training job. But I didn't really, I don't think I would have done well if I had to navigate the system until I, do a Caesar pathway. I know for some people are incredibly organized. I'm just, behind on times, and I have to be put on the pathway. It's pretty drawn out for me, otherwise I completely fail. So I think that was the only way for me forward. But yeah, here I am.
Yeah. Thank you. Lovely introduction. I have the pleasure of knowing you, Hagar. So I know that I like to talk about part of this series is also talking about the supporting cast in our stories. So you came here, obviously you're an immigrant from Egypt. I think one of the people who's part of your supporting cast is Brooke, your friend, who I thought you'd want to join, but she's being a bit shy. So just tell us about your friendship.
My first job was in Woolwich, which is southeast London. It's a bit of it's dodgier even than Egypt, I have to say. But I met Brooke there. So Brooke is an intensive, well, it's a specialist intensive care nurse. It was her first job as a nurse after qualifying, and she's always been into intensive care nursing. She's never really done any big war jobs as part of her career apart from her nursing training. And I was this new sort of random doctor who can do her job when it comes to medicine. I think I'm still remembered at that place where just tell me which patient you need to do, I'll do it. Tell me which patient needs a line, I'll do it. Just don't ask me to do any paperwork. I don't understand. Don't ask me to do my fancy referrals. I don't know who these people are. People kept talking about places like Tommy's. I never really knew what that place is. These like random acronyms that comes up and people don't really say what do they mean. And when you're new, everything is just a group of short letters that mean nothing to you, but everybody, like, nobody ever challenges it or questions it, and you don't want to be the dumb person in the party, so you just like tag along. Anyway, I was that person, and I actually can't remember what started us off, but essentially we became friends after working there, and I got a job in Surrey after I left Woolwich, and she also did. So we both had to move, and then it made sense if we both have to share a flat, because I was living with other people and she was living with other people. Neither of us have had sort of independent lives like grown-ups. We just sort of functional arrangement. So it made sense that we moved together. No, essentially we ended up in this very intense friendship where we both share the same house and actually share the same job. So essentially we became an integral part of each other's lives. She doesn't have a lot of siblings who live around. She doesn't have any siblings at all, and all my siblings are back in Egypt. So yeah, I think from then on we genuinely just don't introduce ourselves as like if I'm going out or if I'm being introduced to new medical people, which is my social circle. I'm not a wild person, so most of my social interactions are with medics of some description. So is she. So it makes sense. She's a medical person and I'm a medical person. So she's having nursing friends, she's going out, she introduces me to them, and the same works the other way around. So we ended up where we both have the same group of friends, more or less the same job and the same house. And now it's in dog as well, because we co-parent our dog. So yeah.
Oh,
She played a good part in sort of making me understand what my random question every day was, what do they mean when they say this? What do they mean when they say that? Is this person really making fun of me, or is that a joke? Are they serious? So there is a lot of cultural things and
like your own personal cultural cheat code.
Yes, true. We played a good part in each other's life, where I understood the nursing perspectives in so many things. Especially, I've done so much for my ITU since I came here. I didn't have a lot of IT training back in Egypt. I was mainly in anaesthetics, but here I've done so much sort of DGH ITU. And she played a good part where she taught me like what the nurses will, but like the basic income when you're doing a line thing that a lot of doctors don't know unless they're called out after spilling a huge amount of blood and ruining the whole bed sheet.
Been
I
there.
never did that. I never did that because I was well brought up. I was told always put an Inco sheet. You can never go wrong with Incos. So just shoving as much
Well,
as
you were teaching me, so you put it for me anyway.
well,
you need a
yeah,
good teacher.
thank you. I try to pass on the knowledge. But I think even medically, not just because of the social interaction, there's so many things. The doctors are so behind on their training compared to nurses, because the nursing school is about 3-4 years tops, and then they go in really young and they graduate really young. So by the time you can be the same age as one of the nurses, but they would have at least good 4 or 5 years of experience in their specialist area, because by the time you've graduated and done foundation training and done your rotations, and then you're always this new kid on the block who doesn't know what they're doing, and you need nurses' help. And the one piece of advice that most like the veterans would tell you is just don't piss off the nurses. And I'm sure everybody has heard this everywhere, and it's not just about the UK practice. I'm sure it's everywhere. It was the same in Egypt as well. So I think there are things I didn't understand she explained to me in practice, and there are also sort of medical perspectives that I like to think that I did help her with. So I think she's one of the best nurses to get on with the doctors. She actually understands the issues that we go through far better than many others. So I think we sort of held each other out in our careers, and the nurses, at least in that hospital, tended to like me. I tended to be good friends with the nurses, and she's good friends with the doctors because she knows like they find her understanding of their issues and troubles as well. So it worked well. I like to think so.
Yeah, definitely. So outside of work, you mentioned you have the same social circle as Brooke. What else have you done together? Have you traveled? Have you done anything else together?
We've done a bit of traveling together, yes, when traveling was allowed. um, we went to Rome, we went to Amsterdam, we went to Vienna. We What else have we done sort of together apart from owning a dog together? So now we're parents. Now we just have to take turns looking after the dog. She basically does all the anything that needs muscle. So walking the dog, doing that. I buy the food.
Clear division of labor there.
Yes, definitely. Well, the pictures look out. So I think after we got the dog, it just now is this situation where we have to work opposite shifts as much as possible, so that there's always someone with the dog. He's a little bit of a prince. He doesn't like being left alone.
I have no idea how you do it. I'm deathly afraid of dogs. A dog chased me when I was little, and oh my god, I mean, I don't like dogs. I'm not a fan.
I'm Egyptian, so being chased by dogs is part of like it's an integral experience. Like you have to go through it to be able to walk the streets in Egypt. I never liked dogs, as in I've always liked them, but from distance. I never thought I would actually be able to touch a dog, let alone have one. But I think Brooke's godmother looks after dogs a lot,
Right.
and she's a really nice person. So we go there sometimes visit, and she had dogs over, and I was like, "Can you please hold him? Can you please not let him catch me?" And then it's incredibly difficult to control dogs all the time. So I sort of had to live with them for periods of 2 to 3 hours every 3 or 4 months. But I always thought that I can have a dog if I have them as a puppy, and then I'm not so scared of them. Or at least him. But Wilbur did definitely make me less afraid of bigger dogs, even dogs I don't know. And so now it's fine with me to pet a dog or touch it. There are still breeds that I know are a little bit aggressive, so just don't start if they
Of
come
course,
near
yeah.
you. Fine, just don't go to them. Um, but I think you just get used to it as anything else. You get used to practice medicine in English all the time.
Of
I
course,
used
yeah.
to, so
It becomes a reflex, becomes spinal rather than having to think through the steps all the time.
yeah.
You've told us a lot about how Brooks changed you as a person, what she's done for you in terms of like a cultural cheat code. What do you think about the effect you've had on her?
Um, there's a cultural thing, obviously, because I eat a lot of our food. I am the cook of the house. I like to think so. I mean, she makes food sometimes, and it's really nice, but it's English food, so let's face it, it's just 3 items. Um, but now she can present a sort of Egyptian food as if she made it.
No
So
way. Wow.
yeah, no, honestly, she. So if like in another sort of parallel universe where I will own the restaurant, she'd definitely be my head waitress because she's the best at presenting it. Like she's able to present my food better than I would present it. Um, I go to a lot of Arab shops to do shisha. She's done some shisha before she met me, but now like she knows she knows her stuff and she knows the places for better. She understands a lot of the places I think a bit better because before we became friends, like she basically knew that the Middle East is a hotspot, but she wasn't like into the root of the problems or how did they come around.
Yeah.
I, she now brags a lot about the fact that she has core understanding of fundamental issues with the Middle East and stuff term was coined as the Middle
Yeah.
East. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's a bit difficult for younger generations who don't have to fight a fight or like know an area through a war.
Hmm.
Um, and apart from Iraq, which isn't really a war, it was a one-sided war. They really don't know a lot about the Middle East. And yeah, I wouldn't say I pride myself because you actually listened to what I had to say. I do tend to have a verbal diarrhea when it comes to politics or history. And people usually zone out 2 minutes into the conversation while she listens. That's good. But she, let alone actually grasp some of the concepts I talk about. So that's good, I suppose.
I think so. I've got the benefit of knowing both of you, and I remember talking to Brooke about this when I was in ITU with both of you, and she said this thing which I found really funny. She's like, "Oh yeah, I mean, she's praying all the time," and it's just this cultural understanding which I found really amazing. Actually, I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, the
So
thing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you live with a Muslim person. You know how they live. It's just different way altogether. There's certain things you just pick up.
Don't get me on
Um,
the fasting.
huh?
Don't get me started on the fasting. That was a whole other issue.
Yeah, yeah. We'll save that for another episode. So the name of this episode needs to be the name of your hometown. Your hometown is Cairo. Let's start off with the question. So, what do you miss most about your hometown, apart from family?
Um, I think I missed the nightlife in Cairo. Um, there's so many things that are different in Cairo. When you say a town is big in England, it's really nothing compared to Cairo. Cairo's a massive city. I didn't realize how big Cairo is until I left it. And the options, you could get 24-hour McDonald's in Cairo. A lot of places, most of the places I lived in
Hagar,
Cairo.
come on. I mean, you cannot sell Cairo using McDonald's, please.
No, I'm just
Sell
thinking
it using something else.
something honestly relatable
Yeah.
because the city just never sleeps. You always have somewhere to go. You always have somewhere to sit down. You always have somewhere that will serve tea. You can get Cairo's just far too lively, and I don't think I can get this anywhere because I thought because my father worked in Abu Dhabi for a bit. So he worked in the UAE, and I didn't live there, but we had a flat out there, and we would visit in the summer. And I used to think to myself that it's such a nice life, but it's a dead city. I would never live there. I'm sure people who live there like it or at least cope with it, but I just, for someone who came from my background, I could just never cope with the fact that you cannot hail a cab at 2 o'clock in the morning and go wherever you want. And you don't even need an app for that. You have a place to go, not just a cab to use. And you can just sit at 3 o'clock in the morning downtown central Cairo, have a cup of tea with all the lights on in the street, and people are walking the street. It's not just, you're not a random loner. It's fine all the time to go out, have somewhere to go, have something decent to eat, and have people to talk to. I think you can. I thought when I was moving to London or around London, that would be an option because it's London, and as much as London is nice, it's just not the same. It will never be the same. And I think the bonus for me is that you don't have to be drunk to go out in Cairo at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is such a formality. You're a person, and you don't need to drink to do that. The only thing that you will drink is tea or coffee, and it's fine. But I think in the fact that I don't particularly drink alcohol, I will always be in a social situation a bit of an outlier, as in it will always be a barrier to mixing. As an immigrant, someone did once tell me they was never trust anyone who doesn't drink. And I was still new, that was a few months into living here. And as much as I think the girl didn't mean it in a rough way, but she was Irish, and in her culture, that's the first thing that you do to break the ice. And obviously, I'm the polar opposite of what she would think as someone who would go out with and have a good time with. But I think maybe the wording was a bit particularly was peculiar. I would say that, not trusting someone who doesn't drink, and I think it's, I suppose, being normal in Cairo, which you won't get that. You'll always be a bit different in a way.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting, and I really want to dig deep into that because there's been lots of conversations lately about equality and about inclusion. And I think on the inclusion side of things, this is something that, I mean, I can honestly say that I've sometimes felt excluded over. There's a big culture in the UK, I think, specifically about alcohol. I think in the NHS as well, it's a big thing, and I don't drink. And you don't have to have a religious reason not for drinking. You can just be teetotal for whatever reason. But I think, what do you think about this? Do you think it plays a role in your professional life?
I think it plays a role in making people in my profession as friends, because I can never completely and totally blend in, and I've accepted that I'll just never be that person, because um, it's not just about it's not just about the fact that I religiously can drink. I refuse to be forced into changing something about myself just for other people. I never, and I still don't have that. I don't have any inclination to want to try and drink. So I know if I did that, it would not be for me. It would just to blend in, and I don't
To
want to
fit
have
in.
anything to blend in. If I wanted it, that's a different story. Again, religion aside, but if I wanted to do it just for any inquisition on my own part, that might even be a reason for me. But just to do it for blending in or being with other people, I don't want to have to do something just to do that or just to achieve that. So I've accepted that I'll always be somehow an outlier. I'm a bit lucky in my second hospital. I have a friend who's a Hindu friend who doesn't drink for a different religious reason, but all for a religious reason on his own part. And we've been part of the same social circle for a while now. And it's nice that I have a buddy. So me and him, whenever we go to any work function, it's me and him, the sober people who would sit on the side and watch other people and have something to gossip about because they remember everything. But I certainly know that not drinking is always a barrier, because we were in a wedding in August, a work wedding. So one of our work colleagues invited us to her wedding, and I was sat on a table with work people, and one of the husbands of my work colleagues, we were going through the menu, and the guys were being really nice, and like trying to sort out the things that don't have pork, and because it was a Portuguese wedding, so things were written in Portuguese, and I don't know all the names for pork. I know pork, I know pancetta, I know ham. These are all porky things, but I just don't know all of them. So they've developed the habit of like looking through the menu. Brooke is particularly good at that. She just like vets the menu and the ingredients or anything that we buy for anything that's porky or alcoholic. So we're going through the menu trying to find out anything with pork or alcohol, so that I just skipped that course completely because it was a set menu. And the husband was a bit different, so he doesn't know me, and he was like, "You don't drink, or you don't eat pork. What else you do?" As in, he was a little bit. He thought that this is a bit far too abnormal or far too outside his social norm. That he felt the need to sort of call it out, and we sort of like skipped over the conversation entirely. Um, but I know if I don't know these people, it would be very difficult for me to blend in. It's just because of the fact that they know me and they've befriended me at work before they had to face the non-work side of me. So I know it will be a barrier. It's fine. You can't have it all, I suppose. So.
Yeah, but it's about feeling included in the place you are making a name for professionally, and having those personal relationships translate outside of the work sphere as well. So that's it matters. It matters. This leads on to a different thing. So you talking about inclusion and about feeling like the other. We were talking about just being the feeling of being an immigrant before we went on this call, and you, what do you think about your experiences as an immigrant, as a first generation immigrant in this society? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? How has that been?
If I'm entirely honest, I've always felt for it in Egypt as well. Um, my I have to admit, just being private school, I came from a very sheltered background. I didn't really have big interaction in Egypt. I was the first girl in a very conservative family, so I wasn't allowed to have a lot of friends who go out a lot. So my ideas were shaped by the books and the things that I read and watched at home, and a lot of the stuff were Western. So as much as it was all theoretical, it was very Westernized ideas. I had as much as I did get good quality training in Egypt, I just didn't like the politics there, even the politics at work. Um, was taken for granted if you're in training that you bend over backwards for your professors because they're the ones granting you your degree and keeping your job. And I never fit it there. I was always the girl who had an accent and had idealistic backgrounds and wasn't willing to make concessions. At least here I'm genuinely foreign. Um, I'm used to being an outsider, I think. I think the experience here is just a bit different because the things that people call you out for or think you're different for is new. So it's like going through the experience all over again because it's a new thing. So there because you had idealistic values, but here because you were a headscarf or you don't drink or you don't date or it's different things that make you not normal or make you different, but you still be very different. Um, the other thing that I think I'm personally struggling with is there's no political life. I like politics and I believe that they do as an active citizen, you have to have a role and a say. But I have no election powers. I have no say in anything because I'm not a citizen here. So not that I had to use it a lot in Egypt. It was just because I was around the revolution time. So we thought for a while that we have a say in things. That didn't last long, but still. So I think the lack of you're unable to be a citizen. You're just here to do a job is an overwhelming feeling, or you're here to provide a service. You don't have a say in a lot of things that govern your life. Is still, I think, a thorn in one's back. And I don't think it will ever go away because even if you become a citizen and start voting and doing that, you really don't influence immigration rules that much unless you take a person's interest. And then I don't think a lot of us will be able to do that, especially as first generation. And I think, as an actual immigrant, I think our children or whoever of us make children have a key role more than us because we are unable to force those changes, but through their ideas and the fact that they belong more to this land than we will ever do, they're able to bring about those changes. They digest and take in the experiences that their parents had faced and try to push for better change that we will never be. So it's a long process, I suppose.
Yeah. Some heavy stuff there. I'd totally forgotten about this Che Guevara side of yours, this Viva la Revolucion, this side of yours. So thanks for reminding me of that. This reminds me of conversations in that small room in ITU where we're all stuck doing discharge summaries, and you bring out this rebellious revolutions.
Something about that.
So I mean that's actually really powerful. So I'm trying to joke around, but it's actually really powerful, and it means something. But I'll try and sort of flip the sentiment around and ask you a very fun question. Not to trivialize it, but just because I want to ask you these questions.
No, we don't want people to fall asleep. I have to make them wake up at the end of the day.
Otherwise, I'll be getting emails saying stop that revolution right now. So the question is, how was your first day, your first week, and your first month?
Oh my god, my first day was a disaster.
Let us have it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way around the fact that I think whoever was doing the rota was being mean on some level. So they had a lot of gaps where I first started, and basically I was on a long day on my first day ever in the country. I didn't have an induction period. Didn't have absolutely somebody give me a beeping device and said that this is a bleep. You have to carry it all day.
The bane of every junior doctor in the NHS, the bleep.
Yeah, no, but I said, I didn't know what that is. It was literally my first day of ever. I came in on the 7th. I did my face what's it called? When you go to the GMC and you kind of confirm all your papers and they do the face-to-face interview because I applied
ID
online.
check, yeah.
Yes, that ID check. I did it on the 8th, and on the 9th I was on a long day. So it was a bit of a disaster. I was on a long day on ITU. I didn't understand. I didn't even have all my logins active. It was I think it was a bit of a disaster, and nobody ever acknowledged that. And I think looking back, I don't know how they got away with that. I think there was no big difference between my first week and my first month. As I'm sure as somebody to tell you, the first 6 months tend to be difficult. There's no way around that. I did a lot of watching and not talking. First of all, I didn't, as much as I think I had good basic understanding of English, but I didn't have enough English speed to kind of say everything I want to say in English quickly enough. And I was so terrified of making a fool of myself. I wanted to make at least a decent impression. I'm not completely shit. It's very, very disempowering. I know how to do the job, but everything else is in your way. The system, the other people, the info pads are in the way because people are going to call you out for it. You can do a perfect, line or a procedure or this or that, but there's a million other things that you've done wrong or not done. You would never get there. There was a million things in my way to be able to do my job. But I know how to do the job, but I just don't know how to get there. So the first 6 months, I just did a lot of watching, not saying anything, watching how people log onto the system, request a chest X-ray, do a referral, Google what Tommy means and what do they mean by the guys by KCH. It was a lot of Googling. Had to buy a new phone because my phone was so old. So my first paycheck, I had to buy my first iPhone so that I can, it was just, I had a really old phone when I started. Trying to figure out where you can buy halal meat. That was a struggle. I think there was a lot of culinary disasters in the first year, but now I'm better. My food is edible, trust me. Just took a lot of training, and actually Brooke was my guinea pig in most of these occasions. She ate a lot of bird food and a lot of, probably I'm missing the salt on this one. But yeah, I think, so someone did tell me, one of my friends did tell me that you should not be on a long day, you should have an induction period. I didn't even know what an induction period is, so I didn't know how to ask for it. But yeah, I think many immigrant doctors get used in that same way. I do not believe this is a unique experience to me. And it depends on how well staffed the trust is and how much pressure they are under, or like bosses are willing to succumb to pressure in terms of workforce preparation. Because looking back to all of the medical cases that made it to newspapers or TV or to the court of law, and you'd find that there has been big administrative gaps. I didn't get a proper induction, the Bala case. She came back from maternity leave, she didn't have a trust induction. But it's the same thing. Like reading the things that sort of led her to be where she was on that specific day. Half of it, I was in the same exact spot. It was just a miracle that I wasn't her.
I think it's mostly luck, isn't it, that separates you from that
Not so
place.
far. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So yeah, disastrous.
yeah.
That's the answer.
Sounds very challenging. So you've told us about a few challenges. We've talked about them now. One of my questions is, what has been your biggest challenge? Would it be one of these, or would it be something else?
I think now is a bigger challenge than ever. Not because now, it's because you've sort of built a career, but your parents are growing older. My father, as you know, have had a cancer diagnosis in the last few months, and my grandmother died a month or so before that. I wasn't very close to my grandmother, but I wanted to be there for my mother, and it was COVID times, so doing anything or going anywhere was a bit difficult. The first few years going back is always a trip, blah blah blah, but actually as you establish a life and you've got to pay your bills in a way, and you've had your own kid in the meantime, so you know how much you have to think about money very well and how much you're spending it and how often you can go home. And even if you can go home for you'll do a million swaps and get as much annual leave as you can get. It would be 3 weeks, a month vacation time. It never really is enough to actually look after your family. It's just it will always be a bit difficult, and I cannot imagine how people who have kids struggle even more with the upbringing of their children and how much control they want or influence they want to have over their children. It's almost impossible now. So I think now is harder than ever. Early on, it's easy to just go back. You've not wasted a lot of time and you don't really have a permanent job. But now that you have a job and your parents also need you even more than ever. I left Egypt when it was 2017. My parents were in good health. but now they're not. It feels many of the time, if not most of the time, that I've abandoned them. They don't want me to come back. I know that my parents are adamant that don't want me to come back, and for different reasons. And they know that this is better for me in a way, and I will never find a decent job in Egypt, blah blah blah. But you can never sort of shake the feeling that you've left them, if that makes sense. So I think this is a challenge that will never go away.
I completely understand that because I live with that every day. I've talked about it on a few other episodes of this podcast. I think that's the hardest thing. I think I used to name different challenges in the last few years, but as you rightly said, now at this stage in life, I think this feels like the most painful thing when you think about it. That you spend your time in hospital taking care of all of these different people, and you give your best. You do your best for them. You know, in my case, I take them through their cancer journey. In your case, you put them to sleep, you know, make them better, whatever, their lungs, kidneys, whatever's not working, you fix that issue and you get them back home to their loved ones. And I think the thing that really hurts at times is the fact that when your parents, if they need you suddenly, you'd be God knows how many miles away, and limited by COVID and by all these restrictions on travel, which is really challenging. Having lost my own grandmother last year to COVID, and been in a position which some of my friends know about. I don't know how many people know about this, but I was in a position where so my dad was sick with COVID. My dad, my grandfather, and one of my paternal aunts, they were all in the same ICU, while my grandmother was in another ICU.
Yeah.
And the hardest part about this was that I'm the eldest son. It was a no brainer. I was gonna go. My travel documents were with the Home Office for 4 months because they were renewing it, and it was because COVID and delays, etc., etc. So I immediately applied for a return on a compassionate basis. But by the time they got back to me, they did quite well. They sent it back in few days. Um, but my dad got better, thankfully. But it could have gone either way. We don't know that. And my grandmother passed away, so that was really sad. Um, but yeah, that is the biggest challenge, and I completely agree with you. Um, Now, you know, wherever there's challenges, there's personal growth as well. I firmly believe in that. I firmly believe, and I think you probably will agree with me on this because I think stress gets a bad rep. I think acute stress in any situation shapes you and takes, allows you to flourish in a different way. So I think if you had to think back and tell me what you have learned from moving countries, what would you say?
This might sound a bit snobbish, but I've not learned much. It's just affirmed my beliefs. It sort of put words and labels on thoughts that I've always had, but I didn't know how to say or whether it was true or not. Um, I think the first thought is that I'll always be an outsider. So this is a personal thought. I've always been an outsider. I'm just now much more comfortable with the fact that I'm outside. I don't have to push myself into trying to fit in. I know how to do my job, and I'm very confident about that. So I'll never go wrong with my career choice. It's just some departments will work for you and some departments will not. Just because you've had a bad experience in one doesn't mean you'd always have a bad experience. I've not fitted well in my first trust, but my second trust, which I went on to spend 3 4 years in, I think I've fitted quite well in the department. So it's not always the case, as in it's not just because you didn't fit in one department doesn't mean you won't fit in all of them. No, it depends on the right mixture of people. So it can be either way. And the other thing I've learned, or I've I think I've always knew all along, is that we are made to move. The literal meaning of my name is someone who immigrates, so in Arabic. The term comes from it. So I always thought that I came to literally embody my own name, which is I would move around. I think it's part of life. People have always moved. It's just a lot of people don't want to acknowledge the fact that people have been moving all along, and the type of people who are moving around. And you and I were talking about this just a bit earlier. Is how people are accepting of immigrants and immigration, and you tend to see two types of immigrants: professional and now work line. So some will understand what you've been through and try to support you however they can. They don't always relate to your experiences because the NHS is such a diverse entity to get people from all over the world. So you know you can work with a German doctor who doesn't understand what you've been through, even though he's an immigrant himself. But they sympathize with the effort that you've put into having to acclimatize yourself into a different environment, having to do your job and all your social interactions in a different language. And I think COVID did shed some light on how difficult it is to not be around your parents. People struggle a lot with not being able to see their family for a while, even though they live in the same country. So they understood a bit better how difficult it is to not be close to them. But the other type of immigrant professional that you tend to face sometimes, and you have to work tiptoe around them a bit, is the immigrants who refuse the idea that they are immigrants or want to wash themselves from some sort of stigma they have about the fact that they were just not born here. So these are the ones who try to distance themselves as much as they can from your troubles. And even to the extent sometimes I've been faced with extreme examples with people who just don't even want to make any effort to know you as a person because they don't want to connect to you on a human level. They just want to, it feels to me that they want to forget that phase of their life altogether. And as much as hard as you try, you will never get them on board. It's something about them, it's not about you. So I found that the best way to sort of deal with these characters is just to be professional. They won't be your friends because they don't want to. You can't force yourself on people. And I think they're just trying to forget this difficult time in their lives, and they don't want anything to remind them of it. And that sometimes is you as an immigrant who's still starting out. Yeah. So it hurts a bit because we all look for some sort of someone who share the same human experience. It will be the same for someone who's been, born up here and went to school here and went to college here. I think working in the NHS for someone who's been born here is very challenging because at least third of the workforce, if not more, are non-European, let alone not English. So they won't often find people who they can relate to on a human level and have had the same experience that much. So I think we're all the same in that. It's difficult to find in the workplace someone who had shared your experience. So we all look for that sort of connection at work. And I think these are the hardest people that you face, the people who just don't want to connect, to know you as a human. And I've not actually found a good way around it. I've not found a way to change their minds, but I personally have found a way of trying to avoid any difficult interactions, which is just be professional, I suppose.
I think that's a fascinating analysis of what we were talking about. I agree. I agree with that entirely. Maybe not with examples, but definitely with it's the subtleties, the small things that sometimes you notice with people. But I mean, I think that thing you said about them seeing themselves in you and maybe not liking that bits of themselves is actually really interesting. I never thought about it that way. That's an interesting way to think about it, and I think it is probably true. Actually, I would agree to that. So I've got the last question, which is my personal favorite one. How long have you been in the UK, Hagar?
Since 2017.
Okay, so pretty much, I think
5 years.
similar to me. So if you have you seen Back to the Future?
Yeah.
Okay, so Back to the Future, he goes back in time and he sees his past self. So if you could go back and meet your past self, what would you tell yourself? To the point where, from the point where you were making the decision to move.
I'm afraid my answer to this won't be fun as much as I want it to be.
It doesn't have to be fun, just has to be real.
I think my answer to this is I should have done it a lot sooner. That's not because the UK is good or Egypt is particularly bad. I've had a particularly bad experience in Egypt with the death of my friends during the August 2013 coup. So, 16 coup. So I've lost one of my friends and it would never be the same. It was a really tough time and I would have much rather not to be at that time. I've always knew, even when I was in med school, that it's a 50-50 chance of me staying in Egypt or going, if not more. anywhere, not necessarily the UK. So I think what I should have told myself is I should have done it sooner rather than later. It will always be a bit challenging leaving when you're older or you're more experienced and you're establishing yourself somewhere else from a position of experience. It's always easier to start a pathway from the beginning. I'm a junior anyway, here or there, so it makes no difference if I'm treated as one. Um, but if you do it later, it's a bit more challenging. It's a bit like having a demotion, if that makes sense. Um, but also on the personal level, as I said, I would have much rather not been in Egypt at that time, and not having to wait for the news or have your friends go look for the bodies, and these it's just things that will never go away from your head, no matter how many time you want to push it away. So it would have just been better if I wasn't there. I don't know. I mean, it's as you and I would say, it's got planned. So I was there for a reason, but it wasn't a happy reason, if that makes sense.
No.
Um,
No, that sounds really traumatic, actually. I mean, I can't even imagine what you went through. That sounds really hard. Um,
we had our share, I think.
yeah.
So
Sorry,
you need to
I
now find a different note because this is a very sad note to
no, no,
end.
I didn't know about that. You totally floored me with that. I didn't know that your friend passed away. That is really sad. That's really traumatic. Yeah.
He wasn't actually in the sit-in. He went after the breaking up started. So he went in his own medical capacity. He was a surgical trainee. So he went to help and he got trapped. And then we lost contact with him. So I think they started breaking up the thing about 6:30 in the morning. We lost contact with him around 11 o'clock, sort of like lunchtime. And the body was not found until the next day. He had to clear shots to his chest and abdomen. Um, and they weren't even issuing like death certificates when he passed away because they wanted to track them down. So some people had to forge his death certificate as acute abdomen so that we'd be able to bury him. Because they were tracking down anybody who was there, anybody who was injured, to
Of
track
course,
down
yeah.
the families as well. So yeah, it wasn't a fun time being in Egypt. I got trapped in hospital for at least 4 days because the sit-in was near where I live, actually. So the whole area was completely cordoned off. So I couldn't get to my family. I couldn't go anywhere. So I spent 3 4 days in hospital. Um,
Putting in lines left, right, and center.
yeah, exactly. It was such a bizarre time for me because I couldn't stop crying, but I was actually doing my job. And every time people would walk in, I was just like crying and like putting lines, and I didn't stop. I just couldn't stop crying at the same time. And they were like, "Do you need a break?" And I was like, "No, I'm fine. I just don't need a break."
Classic you. Not the crying, but the putting in lines. Like, do whatever you're doing, just
Yeah,
doing
exactly.
something.
I suppose this is why I never need light. I can do anything in the dark as well. I don't need to see.
It
Yeah,
was funny when you were teaching me to do I think one of my first few central lines. You were like, oh yeah, no one uses ultrasound anyway in Egypt. This is all done by landmark.
exactly. What do you mean I'm
It's a luxury.
I know. I mean, I did. During COVID, I did used to put in some subclavian lines blank.
I'm going to end this on a very positive note, actually. Slight flex here, but I remember getting so good at doing lines that the last ever line I did, because obviously I didn't have to do it after I left ITU. That's just the way the system works here. If you're in America, it works differently. Um, but the last ever line I did was with a very senior nurse who I won't name, but I'll just say that she was an absolutely fantastic nurse. I think I'll try and tag her. I'll try and tag her on the link for this episode. So tribute to her as well. But it was so good that I remember her looking at me. She's like, "Are you going to be okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." I was doing it alone because there was no one. I think we're busy. Different
Yeah.
patients coming in, so I was doing it. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll be fine. Don't worry." She goes out for a bit. By the time she's come back, I've done the line, finished, wrapped up, patients clean, and she's like, "Oh, you've done it already." And that was like an amazing moment for me. I was like, "Yes, this is it. I can leave ITU now." My head held high. I can leave ITU. I've done a line. No one's even noticed. That anonymity is what I wanted.
Exactly. You're very swift like Flash. Yeah, no, I completely get that.
I'm going to end this on on this note. It's been lovely talking to you, Hagar, and I've taken up most of your evening. Well, actually, we've talked about some really amazing things, and I think this is a very good a very good video to watch for anyone who is a budding Che Guevara, a revolutionary like you. No, I'm kidding. No, but honestly,
Not
like
that famous, not that pretty.
no, anyone um, who can relate, I think it would make a huge difference to them. I think we've talked about a lot of issues that we all face. So thank you for that, and it was a pleasure having you on. It's a bit sad that Brooke couldn't join us. I'm
Well,
saying
she
this
should maybe
loudly so
next
she can
time.
hear us.
Maybe
Um,
you can do a sort of a subsidiary podcast about, the experience of
Absolutely.
people who had to deal with immigrants. So, from your
Yes,
point of
yes, yes,
view,
yes. So is Brooke from London?
no, she's originally from sort of Oxfordshire, but she's
That's
went to
it. That's gonna
London,
be that's gonna be one of the episodes then.
Oxfordshire to London.
All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much
thank
for
you thank you very much, Hagar.
nice seeing you as well and catching
Yeah.
up.
Thanks
Hope
very
we
much.
actually get to do it in person at some point.
Absolutely. I'm gonna